Hello students, in the previous class we were talking about free consent which I have explained it in brief. Then we have learned about various kinds of contracts which are void ab initio, that is contract with a minor. Then we have another type which is contracts with unsound mind. Unsound people of unsound mind. Contract with minor is always an void contract, void from the beginning. The previous class we have examined various case studies related to void contracts, that is contracts with minors. And continuing that particular topic only, contract with people of unsound mind is also void. Unsound mind means people who are unable to make rational decisions. What do you mean by rational? What do you mean by this word rational? Rational means a person in his right sense of mind making a correct decision. Right? Let's say, for example, a person is uh, selling apple. Another person is also selling a similar apple. Say A and B. A is selling an apple for 40 rupees. B is selling that apple for 100 rupees. I repeat, there is no difference in quality, size, taste or color. Now what would a rational person do? Definitely he would go to A and purchase the apple for 40 rupees and not for 100 rupees. Yep, if A and B are sitting together and selling their fruits. That is called as rationality. So a person in his right sense of mind is a party to a contract, then only the contract will be considered as valid. But in case if a person is of unsound mind, it can be anything. It can be madness or temporary illness wherein he is not able to make rational decisions. If he is entering into a contract, then that contract itself is considered as void. Okay, fine. Unsound mind means, okay, you may ask me, madam, after few days this person might get a treatment from a psychiatrist and might become a sound mind. In that situation, can he enter into a contract? Very well. Even though an unsound mind, in case if he enters into a contract when he is of sound mind, then also the contract is valid. Please remember, the contract is valid. The law clearly states that in case of an unsound mind, if he is occasionally, sometimes he becomes of sound mind, and he enters into a contract when he is of sound mind, then the contract is valid. Similarly, sometimes if a person who is of sound mind occasionally becomes unsound mind, enters into a contract, then the contract that had been entered into when he is of sound mind is valid. Here always remember, sound mind. A person should be of sound mind. Meaning he should be able to make rational decisions. Then the contract is valid. Now let us discuss about free consent. The other day I have touched upon this topic. Today we will go into detail. What exactly means a free consent? Free consent is something wherein both the parties are not pressurized to contract. Okay, this is quite an interesting topic. So, two parties, when they are coming into contract, both should have an intention to execute a common task wherein they get a consideration. And both should have act upon free will. Nobody should force a person, right? Similarly, even in studies, if somebody keeps on forcing you, do you think it will go into your head? No. You have to study in your free will, on your free will and with complete interest. Then it will be easier for you and then you can understand the concepts very fast. That is called as, that is nothing but smart study. There's nothing like studying everything in 1 hour or so. Nobody has that elixir. Elixir means a magic potion also. You have to sit down, get interest over, like even though you don't have an interest, you have to create an interest in yourself. Try learning that subject, make it interesting, then only you will understand that. Anyway, coming to this free consent, the law says two or more persons are said to be in free consent when they agree upon the same thing and in the same sense. When they agree upon the same thing in same sense, then they are called as two people giving free consent. Nobody is forcing them to give any consent. See, a person forces another person to do something for his benefit, to do something, then it does not come as free consent. So, in what ways do people force others? In what ways people intimidate others, or in what ways people influence others will be, the law has recognized few aspects, will be talking about them. They are coercion, undue influence and fraud. They happen to be quite important topics. I want you all to take your study material and mark the case studies along with the differences. I'll explain the concept first, then I'll ask you to mark in your study material. You need to give it a reading once to understand what exactly it means. First, we'll start with coercion. What do you mean by coercion? Coercion is forcing a person to perform his part of the contract and blackmailing him, saying that in case if you are not performing your part, then I will do an act which is forbidden by Indian Penal Code. What is Indian Penal Code? Are civil laws. That is, it can be, he might say that if you don't perform your part in the contract, I'll kill you, or I will kidnap your children, or I'll kidnap your parents, or I'll kill so and so, I'll kill your friends. So that is an act which is considered as coercion by IPC, or it is considered as illegal by Indian Penal Code. In case if a person forces another person to commit an act forbidden by IPC, or he saying that in case if you are not executing the contract, then I am going to commit an act which is forbidden by IPC, then it is called as coercion. As we have already discussed, it is voidable by court of law. What exactly do you mean by that? Let's say A goes to Mr. B, forces him to sell his property, and he warns Mr. B, stating that if you don't sell your property, then I am going to kill you. This is called as what? B, for the fear of his life, sells his house property to Mr. A. This particular act is called as coercion. That is, he is forcing Mr. B to do something which he doesn't like. And why is B being forced to commit that? Because A had blackmailed him, saying that if you don't commit this act, then I will kill you. And moreover, this contract is voidable. Let's say B slowly takes the help of police and then goes into court of law, and then if B states that A had been forcing him to sell the property by using coercion, then the contract itself is void. The court will declare it as void and it will not be recognized, or it will not be tried under the provisions of Indian Contract Act. Please take your study material with regard to this. I want you to learn certain case studies here. Yeah. Effect of coercion. Please underline these 3 points. Contract induced by coercion is voidable at the option of the party. Please underline only till there. As to the consequences of rescission of voidable contract, the party, rescission means here cancellation. Please underline that and write it on top of it. The party rescinding a void contract should, from the other party to contract, please underline from there only, restore such benefit as far as may be applicable. Money in case A, as to the consequences of cancellation of voidable contract, the party cancelling a void rescinding should, if he has received any benefit, should restore the benefit. What do you mean by that? Let's say Mr. A, as I told you, has blackmailed B. In the meanwhile, Mr. A had given an advance to Mr. B, saying that I'm buying this property, take an advance. In that situation, even though A had forced or blackmailed Mr. B has to make good the advance to Mr. A. Even though the contract is cancelled, even though the Mr. A had been acting in a manner which is illegal as per or forbidden as per IPC, in case if A had given an advance to Mr. B, that has to be written to Mr. B. Then a person to whom money has paid or delivered under coercion must repay or return it. In case in this particular example, if Mr. A had transferred, like B had transferred the property to Mr. A, then A has to return back the property to Mr. B. Hope you are clear. You can just go through the example which have been given in the study material. Next, we'll go for undue influence. What exactly means undue influence? Here, how is it different from coercion? See, undue influence is something wherein a party, based on its conduct of influencing, definitely forces another party to execute a contract is called as undue influence. What do you mean by that? Usually, undue means, like for example, in a relationship of parents and children, who exercises undue influence? Who exercises influence? Not undue. Who exercises influence? Obviously the parents. In case of teacher-student relationship, who has a bigger hand? Usually the teachers, or doctors or patients. Doctors. These people definitely looking at a weak woman can take an undue advantage of another. So that is called as undue influence. How is it different from coercion? Here in coercion, both the parties do not exercise any influence on each other. But in case of an undue influence, definitely one party is in such a manner that it has an upper hand over the other party. Or it can exercise certain influence. The one party enjoys a position of power, and now it uses that power to subjugate or to influence the other party. That is called as undue influence. In what way? Like I just explained it. There is a relation between parties, and one party is able to dominate another. Like for example, father and son. First, I'll just tell you the theoretical aspect, then we'll talk about the case studies. They are all important. Each and every aspect has one case study. Position to dominate wealth. What do you mean by that? A person can literally influence them. Let's take a small example in a positive manner, like a mother and a child. A mother, sometimes the child wants to go out and play, but the mother, given to her authority in a natural way, in case if there is an exam the next day, she forces her child. She uses her power to influence the child to study. Hope you have got the concept now. So that is called as undue advantage. Now we'll come to the undue advantage as per law or undue influence. See, real and apparent authority, like for example, father and son. Now let's say while son was a minor, the father got the son signed a contract saying that, see Mr. Son, I have spent nearly 5 lakhs on your education. Because now that I am your father, you need to pay 50 lakhs to me. Okay, after he became a major, he came into a contract. He said, son, while you were a minor, I took care of you. So, I spent 5 lakhs over it. Now you need to pay me 50 lakhs. What is this? Using his power or authority of being a father, he is forcing his son to pay exorbitantly high price, 50 lakh rupees on his retirement. What is this? Do you think that contract is enforceable? No. It comes under undue influence. One party is able to dominate other, and when there is a real and apparent authority. The next one is fiduciary. Fiduciary relationship. What do you mean by fiduciary? The word fiduciary. Fiduciary means relationship of trust. A teacher and a student. A teacher and a student. Let's say a student was holding a motor car. He had a motor car with him. Now the teacher forced the student to sell this motor car to him, saying that because I'm a teacher, you need to respect me, you need to follow my advice, and you need to honor my order. So sell the motor car. The motor car's price in the market was say 3 lakh rupees. But the student forced the student to sell that particular motor car only at 1.5 lakh to him. So what is that called? Fiduciary relationship. There is a relationship of trust between both the parties. Along with father, son, mother, daughter, or whatsoever, parent, children, fiduciary means they may not be related, but still there is a relationship of trust. Let's say a stockbroker and a client. The client wanted to purchase shares from another party, but the stockbroker sells him his own shares. Here he is taking an advantage of client's unknowingness. That is also called as undue influence based on fiduciary relationship. There is a relationship of trust between two parties. Taking the advantage of trust, another party is forcing one party taking the advantage of trust is forcing another party to enter into a contract. That is called as fiduciary relationship. Okay, using fiduciary relationship, a contract is being entered into. Such contracts are also void. Then comes mental distress. Mental distress is common in all humans. Mental distress is something when they are unable to make rational decisions. When does this mental distress come into play? When a person becomes old, or when a person is ill, or because of any bodily distress, then the person has to suffer a mental distress. In such situation, the other party might take an advantage. Like for example, a doctor and a patient. A doctor knows a patient is of unsound mind, or sometimes he is like under mental distress and he becomes, I could say, sensitive, or he becomes easy to handle. So when the patient is delicate or sensitive, the doctor makes him sign a contract over and above his fees, over and above his regular fees. Let's say the patient is supposed to pay only 5 lakhs for the services of doctor. But in case if a doctor during a delicate situation knows that patient will agree to anything, makes him sign a contract for 50 lakhs for the services of doctor, then it is called as patient acting under mental distress. See, mind you, they are not of unsound mind, but they are slowly influenced, slowly brainwashed into believing something which is incorrect, and they are forced to do something against their will. That is called as mental distress. Mental distress is caused due to old age, illness, or certain bodily distress. Then comes unconscionable things. What do you mean by unconscionable? Something which is very, very unfair. The very meaning is something which is very, very unfair. You must have studied in your economics class. During during old times, usually, especially landlords, they would make farmers sign agreements. Like when farmers would take loan from the landlords, they would make them sign agreements at exorbitant prices, rate of interest. exorbitant rates of interest. That is 12% per month. 12% per month is something it's horrible. Like 1% per month means 12% per year. 12% per month. It's just like taking the principal and it's over and above the principal. The interest itself is over and above the principal. If a person is made to or is borrowing a loan of 500 rupees and interest can be 10% per annum also. If it is 10% per month, the whole interest itself will range around thousand. The whole loan will come around 1,000 rupees or 1,500 at the period, at the end of the period. That is called as unconceivable. Unconceivable. That is the very base of the contract is quite unfair. Like there was this drunkard and wayward person, a street urchin. He wanted to borrow money. So he went to a landlord. There he borrowed 90,000 rupees, but for that 90,000 rupees, the landlord was charging 12% interest per month. It's not based on an annual calculation. Per mensim, it's called as mensim. That is, it ranges around 144% at the end of the year. 144%. Mind you, it is over and above the principal payment. In such situations, definitely those contracts are considered void. This particular case study had been given in page number 1.43. A youth of 18 years of age, spendthrift and drunkard, borrowed at a compound interest of 2%. So this is something which is quite unfair. So these two case studies, a money lender advances 1 lakh to B, an agriculturist. So these both case studies, please go through them carefully. And moreover, in case of an undue influence, most importantly, there should be a party who is exercising his power on the other party and taking an unfair advantage of it. And in case if this particular contract is in case of this particular contract had been sued by a party or the party who had been aggrieved by the terms, then the onus or then the duty of not showing that the contract had not been entered under unfair or undue influence is on the party who had exercised this undue influence. What do you mean by that? See, Mr. A and B are there. Now, taking the same example which I have explained in the previous topic. Now, Mr. B, coercion. Now, A is the father of Mr. B. He is forcing Mr. B to sell the property, sell the self-acquired property of B only at 25,000. The property costs 2 crore 50 lakhs for Mr. B. With great difficulty he bought it. But now Mr. A had forced Mr. B to sell the property to him because A happens to be the parent of Mr. B. Now, Mr. B had filed a case in court of law. Now, Mr. A has to prove that the property was not sold to him at using undue influence. That's what this point explains. Then goes fraud. Hope you have understood these two topics, and please note down the differences between coercion and undue influence which had been given in page number 1.47. They are very important. The biggest difference between coercion and undue influence is there is no relationship between the parties whatsoever. And in case of undue influence, a party exercises a relationship. I'm not talking about natural relationships. It can be a relationship of trust as well, or relationship formed during distress conditions and so on. Here there is a relationship in which a party is taking an unfair advantage over another party. That is called as undue influence. And please note down the differences between coercion and undue influence in page number 1.47. Yeah. And one more point I wish to say is, in case of coercion, it might not always be promising. It can be a third party. Like A had forced Mr. B to sell his property, and in case if B is not selling the property, A is saying that I'll kill your wife. That is a third party. In such case also the contract is void. Then we'll talk about fraud. Fraud, as everybody knows, it is a cunningness. It relates to cunningness. Fraud is something which is an act which is actually committed by a party with an intention to deceive. Fraud is an act committed by a party which have an intention to deceive another party. So definitely any party who enters into a contract in a fraudulent manner, definitely the contract will be considered void. So what does law talk about? What are the ways in which a fraud can be committed? Please take down these points in page number 1.44 to 1.45, which are essential. Please underline this. Analysis of section 17, that is fraud. So first please take down the points, then I'll explain it. Please underline this line. There must be a representation or assertion which is false. The representation must be related to a fact. The representation should be made before the conclusion of the contract. The representation or statement should be made with the knowledge of falsity. The other party must, please underline from act. The other party must act upon the representation. The other party must have relied upon the representation. The other party acting upon representation should have suffered a loss. What do you mean by representation? First of all, you have seen so much of representation in section 17. What do you mean by that? Representation means a statement, a fact. It's a statement or a fact or something oral or written. Representation means it's just a way of a word, so please don't get confused. Representation means a party telling to another party in a fraudulent manner. So how should this representation be, or how should his words be? They should be first and foremost false. Second one is the other party must know, I mean to say the party saying it is false, party making this statement should know it is false. Should know it as false. Then this party should have an intention to defraud another person, or fraudulently, I can call it as to fraudulently claim an advantage. Claim an advantage. And when should this fraud be committed? This fraud or this falsification should be made before conclusion of the project, should be made before conclusion of the contract. Okay, the essential parts. The same point I am just explaining it, which you have marked in your study material. Definitely falsification, lack of space, I just explained the other 4 points. So once it has been made before, falsification had been made before the contract, definitely another party is going to suffer a loss, because of which, and this other party being influenced by this incorrect statement had acted upon the contract. It's given over here, please go through it. And this other party should have been deceived properly. Because of this misrepresentation, the other party had been deceived and definitely they have suffered a loss. So these are the 8 essentials of a fraud. Hope you have gone through it. Then we'll talk about the examples. They are quite simple examples. I'll start from example 2. Example A is very simple one. B is A's daughter. Please underline those examples. B is A's daughter and has come of age. Here the relation between the parties would make it A's duty to tell B if the horse is unsound. Actually, he has taken another example about mere silence. I'm sorry, this is a different one. This is with regard to mere silence. This is another topic. Let's say, I'll explain these examples also. Fraud is something like Mr. B sells an horse to Miss A, stating without explaining anything. But B's horse is of unsound mind. Yeah, even though B knows that its horse is of unsound mind and cannot be used, they have sold the horse to Miss A. In such situation, it comes under fraud. All these 8 aspects with regard to fraud had arisen. One party had wantedly deceived the other party party had acted upon the influence of the first party and have been deceived. In such situation, definitely it comes as a fraud. Now let us come with regard to silence. What do you mean by silence? What does the Act talk about silence? Go to page number 1.45. See, usually when there are 2 parties, a seller and a purchaser, let's say the seller had not explained some vital facts to the buyer. Just see this important example. A seller had not explained certain vital facts about that particular product to the buyer. So here the buyer had not made an inquiry. You might get confused with the previous example. I'll give you the difference. The buyer also had not made any inquiry. In such situation, do you think the contract is valid and do you think a fraud had not been committed? Most of you might have said yes, a fraud had been committed because the seller had not disclosed facts about the property. But let me tell you, there is something called as caveat emptor or buyer beware. That is the custom. Yeah. There is something called as a Latin term with regard to this called as caveat emptor or buyer beware. Let me just check out the what do you mean by that? Here the law recognizes the example which I have taken. In this situation, the law recognizes the contract as a valid contract. How, madam? Just now you were taking an example of Mr. A and Miss B, wherein Mr. A had sold a horse of unsound mind to Miss B. How can you say that Miss B, just now you said Miss B had been defrauded or she was fraudulently convinced to purchase the horse? Here, mind you, in this example, I just did not give you one explanation which says A had convinced Miss B stating that the horse is of a sound mind. Here, fact had been falsified and had been explained to Miss B. In such situation, that comes as a fraud. Now, in this example, if Miss B does not inquire and make her individual inquiries before purchasing a horse, then the contract will still be considered as valid. Mr. A says, I'm selling a horse. Now Miss B goes there and she just purchases it without any inquiry, without any scrutiny, without any kind of check. She goes and purchases it. Then that situation, A is not at the fault. It says that definitely the law recognizes the contract. Now Miss B cannot say I will not pay the money because Mr. A had not informed me that it is of unsound mind. The onus of proving or inquiring about the product lies on the buyer. That is called as buyer beware or caveat emptor. Very important topic, and that's why here in this particular section they say just mere silence is not a fraud. Silence is not a fraud. The buyer has to act upon a decision. The buyer has to act upon a decision, and then he has to make relevant inquiries and then decide whether to purchase or not. There are exceptions to this rule which we'll discuss, but before that I said I'll explain about those examples. Example 1, 2, 3 and 4. Go to page number 1.44. Mere silence, explanation to section 17, please underline the sentence. Mere silence as to facts likely to affect the willingness of a person to enter into a contract is not fraud. Please underline that. Example 1. A sells by auction to B a horse which A knows to be unsound. A says nothing to B about the unsoundness of a horse. This is not fraud by A, which I just explained. B is A's daughter and has just come of age. Here the relation between the parties would make it A's duty to tell B if the horse is unsound. Now when they are related, here this example says that when they are related, because they are related and A is the father, definitely it will become A's duty to say. Here mere silence is not a fraud, is not applicable. Then B says to A, if you do not deny it, I shall assume that the horse is sound. Now comes the real fun. Now let's say, continuing this example only, now B is going to purchase a horse from A. Now B, without making any inquiries, without checking the horse, clearly states that, see Mr. A, in case if you are silent, I'll assume that the horse is good. In such situation, definitely it will come as a fraud in case if Mr. A does not open his mouth. So hope you have understood this particular concept with regarding the sale of horse. And then we have another one. A and B being traders enter into a contract. A has private information in change of prices which would affect B's willingness to proceed with contract. In that case, A is not bound to inform B. This can come as a case study. See, there is a change, like they have entered into a contract and B said whatever is the existing price, I'm ready to pay. Let's say A wants to sell goods to B on, let's say, July 5th, that is next month. Now, A knows pretty well that as on July 5th, the prices are going to rise. In such situation, definitely A need not inform B and it is not called as falsification of records. But in the initial three cases, what I have explained, like first case is mere silence cannot be taken as a fraud. Second case, in case if there is a relationship between the purchaser and seller, then definitely as a father, Mr. A has to inform Mr. B. And in case if Mr. B very cleverly says that, in case if you are silent, I'll assume that everything is correct, then the contract, in case if A sells an horse of unsound mind to B, then definitely A will be at mistake, that is, he will be definitely considered as a fraud. And the last one is an exception wherein in case two traders are there, one trader knows that change or fluctuation of price, but still he enters into a contract, that will not be considered as a fraud because it is an ordinary course of business. Hope you have understood that. Now let us talk about exceptions to this caveat emptor. So what are the exceptions to caveat emptor? Exceptions are, first in exceptions wherein or when silence is considered as a fraud. So what are the exceptions? In case of fiduciary relationship, just now I have given you an example. Contract of insurance. Contract of insurance, then contract of marriage, and last but not the least, contract of family settlements. Contract of family settlements. In this situation, both the people, that is promisor and promisee, or the offerer and offeree, should not keep quiet. They should explain the facts. Just now, fiduciary relationship, father and daughter. Mr. A is selling a horse to Miss B. Now, when the horse is of unsound mind, because of this relationship, the father should convey the facts to the daughter. In case if he doesn't convey the facts, then silence is considered as a fraud. What do you mean by the term insurance? Everybody might have heard. Like insurance companies, I'll explain it in detail. But as of now, please remember indemnify. Indemnify means making good one's loss. In such situation, like let's say what insurance company says is every year you pay 500 rupees to us. In case of any health problem, we'll pay you 1 lakh rupees. That is called as contract of insurance. In case if a person suffers, let's say X, in case if they come into contract with insurance company, then insurance company says, sir, please pay us 500 rupees every month. In case if you have any health problem, then you need not pay the amount. We will indeed give you 1 lakh rupees for your treatment. In this kind of contract, insurance company has to disclose all the valid facts. Like certain health insurance companies, they do not cover certain diseases. Those all have to be conveyed. There you can't expect the buyer to inquire. There the silence is considered as a fraud. That's why you might have seen in insurance documents, all terms and conditions are written in small letters. You can ask your parents for that. That is called as contract of insurance. Contract of marriage, I need not explain anything. Definitely whatever be the situation of either of the spouses, they need to explain everything to the other spouse. Otherwise, definitely it comes as defrauding. Yeah. So the next one, definitely continuing with marriage, is family settlements. Even in case of family settlements, all the facts have to be properly revealed and accordingly bills or property divisions have to be made. Otherwise, it is considered as a fraud. With this, I have completed explanation of the fraud, and again the differences of fraud with misrepresentation had been given. To understand what exactly is the concept of fraud, you can please refer page number 1.47. Then comes misrepresentation. What is misrepresentation? See, all these contracts, coercion, undue influence and fraud are voidable at the option of the aggrieved party, one party. Okay, misrepresentation and mistake I'll take in the next session. Thank you.